Okay, so moving ahead to our next session, session number two, we would talk about different types of wines. This is where um, our little bit of what we discussed in session number one would come and play. Uh, the first and the most important kind of wines that we'll talk about is still wine. Um, and talking about still wines. So this is what the majority of the wines are. The majority of the wines in the world fall into this category. You go to a market, you go to a retail shop, you pick up a bottle of wine. Most likely, it's going to be a still wine, which basically just means that the wine has no sparkle. It is still. It's a simple white red or a rosé wine between 8% to 15% alcohol by volume ABV. And these are the kind of wines which are either known by the name of the region, or they are known by the grape varietal that it has been made from. For example, you must have heard a few grapes, the name of a few grapes, and we're going to discuss this moving ahead. You take a bottle of wine and you see you've written it's Chardonnay on it, or a Pinot Noir on it, or a Cabernet Sauvignon on it, or a Merlot on it. These are still wines by the name of the grape. So there are chances that either the name of the grape would be on the bottle, or it would be named after the region. The region being Bordeaux is one example of the region. Chablis is another example. These are the regions in France, and that's the difference between the old world producing nations like France and Italy and Spain, wherein most likely you will find that you'll have uh, the still wines, or any wine for that matter, are named after the region, like Bordeaux, like Chablis, like Champagne, like Rhone, like Chianti. So all of these are name of the regions when we talk about. So basically, still wines are simple wines. Majority of the wines around in the world, 8 to 15% of ABV, either after the name of the region or after the name of the grape varietal. Examples are Bordeaux from France, and Chablis again from France. When you talk about the name of the grape varietal, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and many other as well fall into that in this category. So three types of still wines. First of them would be the white wine, very common. You see it every now and then. Made from white grapes, can occasionally be made from black grapes as well. You take the skin off from the black grapes, you can make a white wine from that. So white wine, obviously red wine must be made from black grapes. You need the skin for the color and the tannin and the flavor as well. So red wines is the second example of still wines, and obviously the third one would be the rosé wine. Now these kind of wines, rosé obviously means pink in French. So these are the kind of wines where they're again made from black grapes, but there is a short contact with the juice, with the skins. So the juice stays with the skins for a shorter time, and imparts just a little bit of color, just a little bit of flavor, maybe a little bit of tannin as well, compared to the red wine. So in the red wine, obviously the contact is longer, so you get that extraction and that color. But in rosé wine, the contact of the skins is very short, so you just get a little bit of color from the grapes. So white wine, red wine, and rosé wine. These are the three kinds of still wines that we have. Okay, so our next type of wine is sparkling wine. Very simple. The wines which have CO2 or bubbles in the form of CO2 in it are called sparkling wines. Some of the examples are champagne, obviously one of the most famous sparkling wines in the world. Another one is cava. Um, which is from Spain, a very famous, good value for money sparkling wine. And the last one uh, here is Prosecco. Prosecco is from Italy. Um, all three of them are sparkling wines, although they're made and produced and manufactured in separate, in different ways. We won't go into how uh, they are produced in the production method of sparkling wine in level one. But what's important for us to understand is that all the sparkling wines in the world are the ones which have bubbles in it, and the bubbles are CO2 gas. It's the same CO2 gas that is produced in the fermentation process, although in the fermentation, CO2 is allowed to escape. Sparkling wines are generally made with the second fermentation, and this CO2 gas is a byproduct of the second fermentation, which happens generally either in the bottle or in a tank. And that's a separate topic altogether, which we are not going to discuss right now. Um, Third type of wine is the fortified wine. So fortified wines, as it says, fortified obviously means addition of extra alcohol. And the normal range for this varies between 15 to 22%. Um, these are the kind of wines which you add extra alcohol on top of what they already have to make it make it into a product which carries a lot more alcohol. The reason for this was obviously this this history behind the fortified wine goes back long ago. Generally speaking, the addition of alcohol was the reason behind it was to make them last in the journey across the world. Obviously, there was a lot of import and export that went around from Europe to other colonies across the world, and it was noticed that still wines did not have enough alcohol, and they could not travel well. And by the time they used to reach the destination, most likely what used to happen is they used to turn bad, and they didn't last. So it was a very the business used to suffer quite a bit. So somebody came up with this very innovative idea of fortifying the wines, increasing the alcohol percentage, and obviously the increased alcohol percentage acts as a preservative and does not let the wine go bad. And that is how the wine used to be transported across the world in those days. And I'm talking about 200 years, 300 years from now. Obviously now that particular reason doesn't exist. You've got there are better ways to transport wines. The technology has advanced to that level, but the origin and the concept of fortified wines was such to preserve them over long journeys in the ships and across the oceans. So some of the examples of these fortified wines are sherry from Spain, port from Portugal, Madeira also from Portugal. Sherry comes from southern Spain, which is also called Jerez. Port is from Portugal, from Douro Valley. Madeira is from Portugal. Madeira is an island off the coast of Portugal where this excellent fortified wine comes from. And then Marsala, which is from Sicily in Italy, from the island of Sicily. So all of them are examples of fortified wines. All of them have alcohol added to it. Some of them have alcohol added to it during the fermentation. Some of them have alcohol added to it after the fermentation for different reasons, which we'll probably discuss a little later in this module. But these are the three types of wines: still wines, sparkling wines, and fortified wines. So well, there you go. That's an example of, you can see the glass which has bubbles rising through it right here. That's a sparkling wine. And You also probably have, there you go, you have your fortified wine here, which is a sherry, uh, manzanilla. So that's a few examples of fortified wines. Let me just take this off. There you go. Okay. Okay, last but not the least, the fourth and the last type of wine is called aromatized wine. So obviously aromatized means aromas. So these wines are basically fortified wines which have got aromas added to it, such as herbs, fruits, seeds, barks, things like that. And generally they are used in a lot of cocktails. So you'll find them behind the bar quite a bit. They have special ingredients, especially in cocktails. They're used a lot, especially vermouth, which is one of the examples of aromatized wines. Lillet, that's again an example from France of aromatized wine. Apart from being used in cocktails, they're also generally used as aperitifs. So beginning of the meal, just something to sip upon to, give that get those digestive juices flowing as an aperitif. So that's another example of wines. So we've got still wines, sparkling wines, fortified wines, and aromatized wines. So these are the four types of wines that we generally have. Still wines, obviously, making the bulk of it, and then sparkling wines, fortified wines, aromatized wines, generally being used behind the bar in a lot of cocktails or as aperitifs, being consumed across the world. A lot of emphasis is being given now. There's a new wave of aromatized wines being revived across the world. So that's the end of our session 2. We're going to start with session 3 from the next slide.